Today we will hear a portion of the story of Ruth and Naomi from the book of Ruth, chapter 3 and chapter 4. Last week the lectionary had us listen to the beginning of the story in which Ruth and Naomi and Ruth's sister Orpah are together at a crossroads trying to decide where to go, and Naomi dismisses her daughters-in-law and says, "Go home to your land, to your kindred in the land of Moab, and I will return to my people. There has been a famine in the land, and they are returning, and Naomi's husband has died, and her sons have died, and she says, I have nothing left for you, so go home to your kindred." And Orpah does, but Ruth decides to stay with Naomi in that beautiful passage in which she says, "Where you go, I will go, and where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God." And today's story picks up sometime later, and things are a little better for Ruth and Naomi. And Naomi is hatching a plan to give them some stability. Ruth has been gleaning in Boaz's fields, and Naomi would like to set up the two of them and see if the two of them could become a partnership and be married, and to provide a little more security for her daughter-in-law. And so I invite you to listen. And this is a different kind of a sermon. And so as you hear it, I hope that you will just let the story wash over you. We're going to immerse ourselves in the story and imagine how it might have unfolded. We'll listen for God's word. Naomi, Ruth's mother-in-law, said to her, "My daughter, I need to seek some security for you, so that it may be well with you. Now here is our kinsman Boaz, with whose young women you have been working. See, he is winnowing barley tonight at the threshing floor. Now wash and anoint yourself and put on your best clothes, and go down to the threshing floor, but do not make yourself known to the man until he has finished eating and drinking. When he lies down, observe the place where he lies, then go and uncover his feet and lie down, and he will tell you what to do." Ruth said to her, "All that you tell me, I will do." Picking up in chapter 4. So Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife. When they came together, the Lord made her conceive, and she bore a son. Then the women said to Naomi, "Blessed be the Lord, who has not left you this day without next of kin, and may his name be renowned in Israel. He shall be to you a restorer of life and a nourisher of your old age. For your daughter-in-law, who loves you, who is more to you than 7 sons, has borne him." Then Naomi took the child and laid him in her bosom and became his nurse. The women of the neighborhood gave him a name, saying, "A son has been born to Naomi." They named him Obed. He became the father of Jesse, who became the father of David. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Where you go, I will go. Where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God. How many times had Naomi heard Ruth's words echoing in her mind since that day? Even after all this time, the scene was still etched in her memory, engraved on her heart with a love so deep it actually hurt sometimes. Naomi's husband had died. Her sons had died. It was time for her to go home to Judah, to Bethlehem. The famine was over, and as much as she dreaded the thought of being on her own, alone in her bitterness and her grief, she had to let her daughters-in-law go. They needed security that Naomi could not provide. She wanted that for them at least. If she couldn't give them that, she could at least release them, set them free just to go home, go back to Moab, to their own village, to the familiar. Surely there were people there who would take care of them. She She didn't know the customs of Moab, whether they had extended family, cousins, men who would marry Orpah and Ruth and provide for them, but she hoped that they would. It was in their best interest to leave. So she asked them. And then she begged them. And then she drew her tired body up to its full height, and she ordered them with as much authority as a mother-in-law could muster, which is a lot of authority indeed. "Go home," she said. And one daughter-in-law, Orpah, said, "Goodbye." And the other daughter-in-law, Ruth, said, "I am home." Why did she do it? Naomi often wondered. Why did Ruth cling to her so? Did she feel sorry for Naomi, who was older and didn't have much chance of marrying? Was Ruth foolish enough to think that she could somehow take care of her in Bethlehem? Ruth, a native of Moab, a stranger in the land of Judah? Why would Ruth forfeit her security for the sake of someone else? Naomi often shook her head at the memory of the two of them on the dusty road so long ago. A bitter old widow and a naive young foreigner. They made quite a pair as they made their slow, halting journey toward Bethlehem. Ruth, for her part, didn't think much about that day, about her decision. There was too much to do. Reflection was a luxury she could not afford. Gleaning was grueling hard work, a dawn till dusk undertaking. The reapers going before her often didn't leave much, even though they'd been told by Boaz to look out for her. Occasionally, under the punishing sun, the brown fields of grain would flutter before her eyes, and she would see again the drab, parched road out of Moab. But she always dismissed the memory in a hurry, as if brushing a gnat from her face. What's done is done, she would tell herself, as she filled her baskets with remnants of corn and barley. Security. Security. That's what Naomi had wanted for her. She went on and on about it. But what did security even mean? What difference did security make? Ruth had had security, and what good had it done her? She'd married a good man from a good family. She'd been a good spouse, a good daughter to Naomi. But when the famine came, they even did the sensible thing. They packed up their things and moved to Moab, built a new life there, a secure life, and still her husband had died. They had run from misfortune, but misfortune had pursued them, found them, overtaken them anyway. And so when Naomi told her to go back to Moab, Ruth knew it was the right and sensible thing to do once again. But what was the point of doing the sensible thing, the secure thing? Standing that day on the road between nowhere and nowhere, Ruth decided, away with the sensible thing. She would do the right thing. And in her case, the right thing meant salvaging leftover crops for herself and for Naomi. It meant that she, a stranger in a strange land, would take care of a woman to whom she had no legal obligation. It didn't make a lot of sense, and it certainly wasn't glamorous. She didn't feel noble, her hands hard with calluses, her eyes stinging with the sweat of hard work, or were they tears? It was sometimes hard to tell, but love is like that. Now see, Ruth berated herself. She had let herself think about it all over again. Lately, Naomi has been talking security again. This time she's got a plan for Ruth, a proposal. Actually, if everything goes according to Naomi's hopes, it'll be Boaz's proposal, a proposal of marriage to Ruth. Naomi says, I need to seek some security for you so that it may be well with you. Ruth wants to say, it is well with me. The famine is over. They are managing just fine. This is what she agreed to when she said, where you go, I will go. Yet Ruth knows that part of love is receiving what others have to give. Others look at Naomi and see the sun setting on an old woman's life, her stooped body casting a long shadow of grief against a sky filled with fading color. But Ruth sees differently. Even after Naomi's lifetime of sadness, while others have married and had children and known prosperity, while others have filled their storehouses with every right blessing under the sun, Naomi has been gleaning herself, walking along behind the others, harvesting a little bit of this and a little of that, enough to share with her daughter-in-law. Here, Ruth, I can offer you a little hope, a little wisdom. Here's a handful of risk, a bit of daring. It's not much, but it's all I have. And so Ruth follows Naomi's instructions. She goes to Boaz, and he receives her and blesses her. And in the fullness of time, they are married, and a child is born. The child is a gift for the future, but he is also a gift to his forebears, to Naomi. It is she who becomes his nurse, who takes care of him. Her life has purpose now. Her journey is far from over. It is only just beginning. As she cradles that new life, she vows to nurture the next generation. It is not her child, and yet she is responsible for that child. Your people will be my people, said Ruth so long ago. And now Naomi holds the best expression of that promise. But she realizes it was so much more than a promise. It was a lifetime's responsibility for both of them. Naomi remembers once again that day when Ruth said those life-changing words. And she wonders, whatever happened to the other daughter-in-law? Whatever happened to Orpah? Naomi had sent her home to be safe. Naomi had sent her home to be secure. And for all we know, she is. For all we know, she went back to her family as she had been told to, and in time, she married again as she had been expected to. For all we know, she was a perfectly good person, living her life quietly, safe in the security of home, safe also in obscurity. She was never heard from again. Her story was not told. But as for Ruth, she had Naomi and Boaz, and all of them had this child. Was this what true security looked like? A child? Or was it really hope that they'd been longing for? Hope that they'd been seeking instead of security? Hope and a sign that this was not the end of the story. They could not know, cradling this baby, that their story would be told. They could not know that the child would be father to countless generations, including a man after God's own heart, a man named David, who would become king. They could not know that 14 generations after David, their descendants would be thrust into exile, forced to find their way back to God and God to them, and that they would find strength in their ancestors. They would find strength in the memory of the woman from Moab, whose audacity still coursed in their veins. And they could not know that 14 generations after that, another son would be born in a stable. A man who embodies all that came before and so much that would come after. Who also says, away with the sensible thing, watch me do the right thing, then you go and do likewise. A man who does not provide security, but purpose and bold, outrageous hope. Thanks be to God.